Welcome back to another episode of Mind, Body, Spirit. I'm Dr. Kayte, and today's guest I'm very excited to introduce. He is a natural medicine doctor. He's a businessman. He also has a very compelling story through his own health struggles with chronic fatigue syndrome. He's the author of this book, Beyond Fasting, and he's also, Cellular Detox is the name of your company, right? It's a lot. It's a mouthful.
Yeah, there's a lot there, yeah.
Please welcome to the show, Dr. Daniel Pompa.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for coming. I'm a little flustered because I'm so excited that you're here, so forgive me.
No, I love this topic, so this will be great.
Yeah, and it's a topic that hits home for me. As you know, I do a lot of investigation of mitochondrial health, and so let's back up though before we get into the good stuff. Tell us a little bit more about who you are.
Well, I could talk about all my years of schooling, but none of it really matters. I actually got sick, and that's really what I do now is, from pain to purpose. So now I teach doctors around the world my detox protocols, which we'll talk about, fasting strategies, and really a whole multi-therapeutic approach that I teach. And, I get a lot of big public lecture invites and on these topics.
You spoke at the Bulletproof convention that we just had in Beverly Hills. So tell me more about chronic fatigue syndrome and how that started. How old were you?
Yeah, I was in my 30s, and it started about, 1999. And I was functioning at a very high level. As a matter of fact, I was racing my bike at the time, so I would argue I was in the best shape of my life. I had a thriving practice at the time.
As a chiropractor?
2 young boys. So life was really good. A wife that I loved and all good, except one day it starts, fatigue, and I didn't know where it came from. But I thought I was overtraining. That's what most athletes would think. So I cut back, and it was getting worse, not better. Then it went to headaches. Then it went to insomnia, panic attacks. I couldn't even adapt to loud noise. My wife would literally have to take the kids out of the house because I couldn't handle it. I couldn't handle hangers clanking. I couldn't even watch movies. I couldn't adapt to the excitement. So, there was so much more, so many more symptoms. My thyroid was shot, my adrenals were shot. And like most people, I was downstream trying to fix those. And being a physician, I knew what I was doing. I'm very, adept at reading articles and research. But
and you had resources among colleagues. I'm sure your colleagues were helping.
I did. As a matter of fact, I made friends with a very bright endocrinologist, and because I knew my thyroid wasn't working right. But yet my blood work kept coming out pretty normal, basically. Like many people watching this, right? It's very frustrating. You want something to be off.
Right.
And so he said to me one day, I think you have mercury toxicity. And I said, oh, no, I thought so too, because about a year before I was online searching, I found Mad Hatter's disease. I don't know. You know what that is. Okay, most people watching this probably don't.
Well, Medical Medium has popularized that and talked about it in some of his books. I think people are learning, but you want to explain what it is?
Yeah, people making felt hats, very simply, they were using mercury, and they became acutely poisoned, right? So
in the brim of the hat, right?
Yeah, and it was there, but also, that's right, the other people, but the people making the felt hats, it was felt particularly, they got very sick, and they were known as mad as a hatter.
Right.
I had every symptom, so I thought, surely this is it. So I went and got a blood test, and negative. It showed a little bit, but within normal range. So I was very disappointed, but here I am a year or so later, and he says this to me, and I said, oh, I had a blood test. He said, wrong test. Do this test, because that would show acute, but I think you have chronic. So I did it, and then this is a challenge test where you take an agent, it challenges it out, and then you look at it in the urine. That came back positive. So, of course, I asked the question, where do you think I got it from?
Where did it come from? Yeah.
So he said, did you have any dental work done around the time this all happened? And, he's an endocrinologist, obviously thinking outside the box, right? And I said, maybe, because I had this gold filling put in, and I took 2 amalgams out. So, he ended up asking the question. I called my dentist, who was like my good friend at the time, and sure enough, if you looked at when I got sick, it was just days after I actually had that dental work done, but I never correlated it.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's my story. And then I basically researched how to get this stuff, not just out of my body. What I learned was it really bioaccumulates in the brain, particularly your hypothalamus pituitary, which that controls your whole hormone system, right? That's why my adrenals and my thyroid weren't functioning, because that controls everything.
Right.
So then I had to research basically how to do it right. What I found was most people do it wrong.
Okay.
And so I spent many, many hours and years researching it. So that's what I teach, from pain to purpose.
Wow. And so can I, just to back up a little for the doctors out there, I know there's a little controversy between autoimmunity, treating for heavy metals with certain agents and having autoimmune presentation, because there's some experts who are concerned that it affects the brain barrier and it can be dangerous, and others say that it's safe. So do you want to just briefly?
You know, I agree with both things you said there, believe it or not, because it is I wrote 3 articles that are on my website, When Detox is Dangerous.
Okay.
And it's a passion of mine, because most of the time it will make people worse, because they take real binders and chelators, whether it's IV or even oral, and they don't do it often enough to minimize redistribution. So they just stir it up. As a great example, do you ever see those street cleaners that go down the street? You know, I don't even know if you have them here. I always say
street sweepers.
Okay, I thought that was something from my day and age.
Oh, that's a big thing in Los Angeles, because you get ticketed like crazy if you don't move your car.
So these things, you see them and they're like dust flying everywhere, and you think, what are my tax dollars actually paying for?
Right.
The dust is basically going up and it's settling down on the cars. That's what redistribution does. Meaning that if you don't do it correctly, you stir it up and then it settles down somewhere else. But most importantly, it will end up crossing the blood-brain barrier, to your point. And that can make you very sick. So you have to do it correctly. And there's ways to minimize the redistribution and make it safe.
Okay, do you want to tell us some of the ways, or is that proprietary?
No, not at all. No. Okay, so I mean, there's a couple mistakes made in detox. Number one, people use weak chelators. Things like Chlorella. In a petri dish, it looks like it's a really good binder, but after it meets your microbiome, your gut, you take the pills, it doesn't really bind after that. It changes it. So it's not a good binder. It's weak at best. And then, cilantro, I mean, there's many out there.
Right.
Those cause redistribution. And for someone who truly is toxic, they don't do well with that. You may have experienced that.
Right.
And then there's the other side that does the IVs. They put a lot of a real strong chelator.
Like a DMSA, DMPS.
The problem with that is it goes away. It's water soluble. It goes away very quickly.
It's in the bloodstream, so it goes very quick, just like a lot of the IV vitamins, right?
Absolutely. Okay. And then what happens? The body keeps letting go and redistribution occurs. So now you end up more sick. Happened to me. So if you're taking these real chelators or binders, you have to take them within their half-life. So DMPS is one. You have to take it every 8 hours. DMSA, you have to take it every 4 hours.
Okay.
So they're all different. We developed a product called Cytodetox that you can take twice a day, which is much easier, and it's a super strong binder. So the point is this, not to confuse people. You have to use a real binder.
Okay.
But when you do, you have to use it within its half-life and use it correctly. And then you cycle. So you have to do like maybe 3 days on, 4 days off, 7 on, 7 off, 4 on, 10 off. It's a little different for everybody on what cycle work. But this is why I'm training doctors, because it has to be done right.
And so you sort of have to do it under supervision, and you need to kind of hit it hard, is what I'm hearing you say. Because if you just kind of dabble in it, which I think people do with detox, they start dabbling and then they feel bad. And then they get a little bit, timid about it.
There's no doubt. Look, what I have developed is a 3-phase series. There's a preparatory phase, where you want to open up the downstream pathways. Meaning if you just jump into detox and your liver's not going or your gut's not, you're gonna have a bad go of it, right?
Right.
So we want to prep the major detox pathways. So that's phase 1.
Okay.
That could last a month or 2, or maybe even longer for certain people. The second phase is what we call body phase, where we just get the easy to get toxins using real binders.
Okay.
And we want to move that through as quickly as we can. And then we get to the brain phase.
Okay.
And the brain phase is what saved my life, and now thousands of others. So, because we have doctors teaching what real, detox.
I want to know what the brain phase is now.
So you're using binders like alpha lipoic acid, this cytodetox that I mentioned, and they have the ability, like ALA is a fat soluble. It has the ability to go into the brain. But it goes in and it moves inorganic mercury out of the brain, which, by the way, these silver fillings that so many people have or had, that vaporizes and it crosses the blood-brain barrier. And there it turns to inorganic mercury. And there it's stuck for life unless you remove it out correctly. So this ALA is able to cross over and move the ALA out, but it doesn't do a great job of moving it all the way out of the body. And that's where the cytodetox comes in. It's a really strong binder that becomes a vehicle that moves it all the way out.
Okay.
So a process that I created years ago, again, through pain to purpose, my own battle, real detox has to happen at the cell. So I teach a roadmap called my 5 R's of how to upregulate the cell function to do what it's meant to do, meaning get rid of toxins every day. Most people work down here where they try to get rid of toxins, but they never fix the cell. So I have a saying, you have to fix the cell to get well.
Yes.
And that's caught on, but more specifically, you have to detox the cell to get well. So we have to upregulate what the cell is naturally able to do and should be doing. Once we do that, the toxins will start moving out of the cell. And that's why people don't feel well. That's why their hormones are disrupted. But then we use cytodetox as a vehicle to make it all the way out of the body. Then we use a binder in the gut called bind.
Okay.
The reason is many of the toxins go to the liver. They bind up to bile, which is a fat substance, and then it dumps in the gut to help you digest fats. But it brings the toxins with it. Here's the problem. Your body is designed to reabsorb the bile back to the liver. So guess what it brings with it?
The toxins.
The toxins.
Yes.
So we put the bind product, it's called bind actually, and it's just like acts as a catcher's mitt in the gut. Doesn't leave the gut. So we upregulate cell function. We use a product called cytodetox to bring it from the cell, and then we have a product sitting in the gut so it doesn't auto-intoxicate. So that system is one of the big things that I teach, but I do it in those phases.
Wow, that is unbelievable. And thank you for developing that and for really going like the extra step with detox, because there's just so much stuff out there. I think it's confusing for people.
Very.
But I'm sure a lot of people will be checking that out. Now, this is going to be a little different. I know that you practice under the pastoral science degree, and that from your work I've read online, there's a strong faith component in everything that you're doing. Is that fair to say?
It is. I always say I am who I am. You
know?
And
that's wonderful.
And I am who I am, and I just like, and I always say, hey, look, I love the fact that we live in a country that we can be who we are, right? And have different beliefs and faiths, but I can't help who I am.
But the question, this is what I want to ask you. You're a person who is a scientist. You understand these molecular functions. There's no argument that these things are really happening and these chemical processes are happening in people who are sick. But what I want to know, because we're starting to learn and talk more about energy, we're starting to talk a lot about the spiritual cause of illness. So I would like to know your opinion on that spiritual overlay that manifests physically as symptoms and pain and dysfunction.
Wow. You know, when we look at why people get sick, and I still coach very challenged people, right? And it's a passion of mine because I was that person. It's always a perfect storm of physical, chemical, or emotional, or spiritual, right? If they put the emotional connection in there, of stressors that come together and the bottom falls out. And that's what I see in every interview. So we have these stressors coming together. So yeah, we have chemical, yeah, we have emotional, but oftentimes the spiritual component could be a game changer for people who are struggling. You know, and I have to say, it was for me. I mean, I was a believer, I was a Christian, you know, and again, people have different beliefs, and I'm great with it all. But the fact is that when I was brought down to my knees, you know, I definitely had to dig a lot deeper, you know, and I have to say, I mean, everybody out there that's suffering, there's purpose in it. And I often tell, you know, the doctors that I coach and mentor, I say, look for your purpose in your pain, you know, and everything that I do, the man that I am today, the reason I'm sitting here is all out of me going through what I went through. The years of school, I mean, I don't want to say useless, but everything, it gave me at least the ability to read scientific literature and understand it.
Right.
But everything that I teach, the truth, it all came out of my illness. And, you know, I had to anchor to that. At one point, you know, my wife said to me, she said, I have to not get emotional, but she said, you're going to not only get well, but you're going to take a message to the world. And that angered me at the time. But she was anchoring in because God put that on her heart. And she was anchoring into that before I was. I didn't see it at the time, but now here I am, right? So I always say this to people, look for the promise that's in your, you know, in the pain that you're in. You know, and there's a saying in the Bible, you opened that door up to me, so I'll say
no, I'm
there's a saying called Rak Kazakamat. And the English translation doesn't do it justice. It means be strong and courageous. And those that are sick out there, I would say that to them. But every time biblically, when someone was about to enter into their promise, whether it's getting well or whatever it is, right? Israel moving into the promise God had for them, God would send somebody to speak those very words to them, Rak Kazakamat, but the Hebrew translation is more powerful. It means God has already went before you and beat back the enemy. He's taken the ground. He's prepared the promise for you. Just trust in him. So as Israel was about ready to move into their promise, Moses, literally on his deathbed, his last words spoken to Joshua was Rak Hazak Amatz. And Israel, don't be afraid, because all they saw was the enemies, not the promise God had for them. And he spoke it, meaning I've already been there for you. So, when someone's sick, that's spiritual. That's the kind of stuff that got me through the hardest days.
Wow.
Yeah.
Thank you. And is that something that you go into with doctors and your patients? I assume you have to, right?
Matter of fact, my seminars I teach, and we have every denomination, I think, covered, right? Every spiritual background, and I'm sure there's some devout atheists in there as well. But I can tell you, we all still resonate around those words because they mean something. There's a promise for all of us and a purpose, right? And I think everyone, believes that. So, and I tell you, everyone believes this too. When it gets really hard, when you're about to enter into the promise, that's when it gets hard. That's when our fear. And I find so many people are ready to move into getting well or whatever promise it is. And the resistance comes and they give up. But that's when someone comes to you and speaks, Rak Hazak Amatz.
Okay.
Right? Be strong and courageous, but more importantly, it's already been done for you. Just walk into the promise. That's what gets you through.
Wow. And I think that was something I needed to hear too.
Yeah,
Thank
see
you.
You're emotional about it because you should be.
Yeah, you gave me some kava before we started too. Now, I want to touch briefly because the cool thing about cellular medicine, it's very healing for people who are sick. But if you're not sick, it can be very anti-aging. And as you just mentioned, your wife, who's back there, looks
bring her on.
amazing. And you told me her age, and you told me your age, and you were saying that you guys are aging in reverse. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that.
I got my life back, and now I would say I'm this just loving biohacking to live longer, healthy, right? I really don't care to live longer. I just want to do it without, when you get as sick as I was, you don't ever want to go back. So I want to live my life healthy. But so there's something called telomere testing. It's the only biological clock that we actually know and have, right? So if you look at your chromosomes, not that you can look at your chromosomes right now, but there's a little shoelace. I'm going to show this. I don't know if the camera guy can come in, but we're going to show that little shoelace there. And I'm giving you a minute, but there at the end of a shoelace, you can visualize there's a plastic thing on all of the end of the shoelace.
Right.
Well, it's there to protect the lace from fraying. Okay. So that's what these telomeres do. They protect the end of our chromosome. Now, here's the important part. The shorter they get, the closer you are to death. So we're able to measure that. And it's a very predictable way of looking at your cellular age versus your actual age. So I'm going to be 54 this year, but I've reversed that telomere age. So, every year I like to measure it and I like to see the improvement.
Wow.
And I'll just say this, my wife is beating me.
Okay.
She's somewhere accurately in the testing under 30 years old.
Okay.
And,
well, she didn't have exposure to those metals, or do you think it doesn't?
Well, she has her own story.
Okay.
She actually had very high lead.
Okay.
She didn't get as sick as I did, but it disrupted her hormones. So
what is your telomere age?
Yeah. So now I started off, because of my illness, to your point, I started off 4 years over my actual age.
Okay.
Okay. And then now I'm 11 years younger than my actual age.
Amazing.
Yeah. So that's a 14, 15-year flip there. So yeah.
Wow. That is unbelievable.
Yeah. And it's getting better. It's getting better.
So tell us more about your book. It's tell us what people could get out of it and who the book is written for.
Yeah. Well, I said that my cellular detox is one thing that I teach, but in the 1990s, before I was even sick, I learned about fasting, and I was just intrigued by it because one of my philosophies I live my life by is remove the interference. The body knows how to heal. It will heal, right? And fasting is one of those things that just relies on that innate wisdom that we all have that the body can heal. And so I was intrigued by it. I was probably the only guy really into fasting for many years, so much so that I really didn't teach about it, talk about it.
Okay.
It was something that I loved, but now it's very in vogue, as you know.
Yes.
Right. So I teach, I have a Facebook following. It's called Fasting for a Purpose.
Okay.
And there's a whole story how that was born, but fasting can be spiritual in nature. And I'll say this, every religious group disagrees on everything, even prayer.
Except for fasting.
Except for fasting.
Yes.
They all agree.
That's true.
Yeah, it is. It's the oldest therapy known to man. What happens in a fast is pretty remarkable, but and I have 7 major benefits that happen, but I'll just focus on like 2. So when you do a fast, and I train and teach doctors how to do a 5-day fast, and sometimes it's water, sometimes it's partial, and there's one called a fasting mimicking diet, which, you're basically eating little small amounts of food. So there's multiple ways to fast. But what happens during a fast is something called autophagy. You've heard the word, and probably most people watching haven't, but autophagy was actually the Nobel Prize winner in 2016.
Walter.
No, not Walter, another giant.
Okay.
Walter was up for it, but he didn't get it. This other Japanese
It was someone,
gentleman
an Asian, yes, I remember.
That's right, he's from Japan.
Yep.
So anyways, what autophagy means, in a fasting state, your body's so smart, this innate intelligence, to survive, to get nutrients, right, and water and whatever it needs. It eats your cells, but not just your cells, your bad ones.
Okay.
So the ones that have bad mitochondria, the ones that have bad DNA. So we utilize this as a group of doctors to get rid of your bad cells. And then here's the best part. Every cell, bad one you get rid of, your body produces a stem cell and it creates a new one. And so that creates better cells.
Yeah.
So with each fast, you create newer and newer cells and a newer you.
And it's my understanding that those senescent cells, which are what you're calling the bad cells,
yes,
those are, when they're hanging out, they're actually communicating with cells around them and giving them bad information.
Absolutely.
So getting rid of those can be instrumental in anti-aging intervention.
The word senescent cells is, and you said this pulls into anti-aging, right? You get too many cells living too long. Those are the ones that are linked to autoimmune, cancer, and all the diseases we don't want.
Degeneration, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So when you look at people with autoimmune, they have these cells that are bad cells. They're causing mischief. They're overreacting. So let's just look at white blood cells. You mentioned Walter Longo. He's an Italian scientist. He found during these 5-day fasts, or even, like I said, 5 days is, I think, the best ultimate number of days to fast. But anyways, he found that we have this massive reset of the immune system. Why? So what happens is one of the criticisms of fasting years ago when I was learning about it was, oh, it's bad for your immune system. Your immune system gets lower because
it does, but then it goes back.
That's right.
Yes.
We have this massive drop in white blood cells. Well, the drop is these senescent old cells that are driving inflammation, overreacting, driving autoimmune and allergies, food allergies, right? So the body's smart enough to get rid of those. And then it raises up the stem cells.
As soon as you start eating again,
Exactly.
right?
And those stem cells make new immune cells that aren't overreacting, driving the allergies, the food allergies, the autoimmune.
Right.
So multiple fasts is something I teach to deal with that autoimmune. It's how we stop the body naturally from attacking itself.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for coming. And we have your website on the banner, but where else can people go to get involved in all these Facebook groups? Do you want to just tell them if they want to learn more?
Facebook, if you go Fasting for a Purpose, join our group. We have well over 20,000 people taking through a fasting.
Okay.
And periodically, at least 4 times a year, I take a group through a fast. I do videos. So that would be a good place outside of my website, which you have. And you'll be able to pre-order the book. The book cover is actually going to look different. The hardcover's coming out, and so look for it. You'll be able to get it. Beyond Fasting.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Pompa. There's so much we could have talked about, but I know we tried to get as much as we could. And thank you so much for coming. Thank you, everyone, for watching. This has been another episode of Mind, Body, Spirit. I'm Dr. Kayte. This is Dr. Dan Pompa. You can binge watch the rest of these episodes at drkaytetv.com and on the EverTalk TV app and on Roku.